I expected to be introducing you to a missionary who would bring us stories of kingdom adventures in Asia. And that is part of this inspiring journey. But this little book I'm holding holds heart treasures of a lifetime. You wouldn't think so, because it's not thick, but it's rich. Ontario native Karen Louise is the author of My Lord and My God, Seeing God in Life's Valleys. Wow, what a great theme. Welcome, Karen.
Thanks.
I have to say the most compelling thing in my heart is how you have consistently heard God's voice. Oh, I'm jealous. And I'm sure anyone reading this book is going to be enticed to draw closer to the Good Shepherd, even when it's things you didn't want to hear, even when the direction was other than you'd hoped. You hear from God. How do you explain that? Why don't we go back to the beginning to just establish a foundation? Because when you were very young, you were concerned about being separated from your best friend, and in the process found a new best friend. Tell us that story.
Yes. Yes, I had a best friend all the way growing up, from knee-high up until grade 7. When I was in grade 7, my best friend Sue found another best friend, and that left me feeling on the outside, left me feeling very alone. And I can still remember one day I was with my mother, or I was fulfilling my mother's request to hang the laundry up outside. And as I was hanging the laundry up outside, all of a sudden, into my heart, I heard the words, "Karen, I'm your best friend." And I knew it was Jesus. And from that time, and the loneliness just left. And from that time to this day, he is my best friend.
So sweet.
And I think it just takes the fear away that I'll ever be alone, because he's there. And yeah, the fellowship with him is so rich.
And this was really road tested in a surprising place, because although you knew very early that you wanted to be a missionary, you had to survive seminary in Chicago first. Tell us about fear factor in Chicago.
Yeah, actually that was an incident that happened after my years of seminary. But I had gone to work with inner city children in Chicago. And one of the first nights that we arrived there, my other fellow worker and I, we heard banging on the doors and windows, and we're just terrified, because in that part of Chicago, people would literally sleep with guns under their pillows to protect them. And we knew that gangs were there and killings were
happening.
Yes, they weren't uncommon. So at that point, my coworker and I, we knelt by a chair, and we cried out to God. We said, "God, help us, help us." We had no phone in our apartment. And I can still remember at that time the Lord speaking clearly and saying, "Karen, you have a choice. You can live in fear, or you can live in love. But you must make the choice."
Fear or love?
Yes.
Perfect love casts out fear.
Yes, and at that point I chose love, because, I mean, yes, our lives could be taken, my life could be taken, but if it was taken doing God's will, that was okay. And so just choosing love and choosing to walk in love. Today,
you and your husband are involved with the largest unreached people group, I think, in Asia. And we're being a little covert about that, of necessity. But can you tell us quickly how the Good Shepherd spoke into your heart about Ralph, your husband?
Oh, that's an interesting story. We had first met in '89, and I thought, he's a good guy, but he's just a friend. And then I kept him away for quite a number of years. However, in '96, the Lord spoke clearly to me that I was to be married. And I didn't know who, because I was not in a dating relationship. And then one time, yeah, that summer, I was praying with another woman. We were praying through the city of Toronto. And the evening before, I had been at a conference where there was a man who I thought, oh, he'd be a good candidate, because he was also interested in missions. And so my heart was bum, 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 that pitter-patter. And as I came to pray with this other lady, I asked her, I said, "Please, can you pray for me? Because I'm not clear-minded now. Please, can you pray for me?"
You were distracted by this other guy who wanted to be a missionary.
Yes, yes. So as she's praying for me, clear in the middle of my mind came the words, uphold Ralph, and Ralph is my husband's name, uphold Ralph, and all the feelings towards this other man disappeared. Well, I was surprised, but I just tucked that away. A month later, after I finished a prayer journey across Asia, an older German lady who knew both Ralph and I asked me, she said, Karen, what's been happening between you and Ralph? Because she hadn't seen me for 4 years. And I told her the different signs God had been giving. She almost cried. She said, I've been praying for the two of you for 4 years, that God would bring you together. And anyway, to make a long story short, when I came back, I let Ralph know the different signs that God had been giving, and he encouraged me to contact him, and we could start just corresponding. But I said, no, I don't want that. I want you to hear clearly from the Lord what the Lord is saying. At that point, my faith was so strong. So for 5 months, I didn't hear from him. Then when I did hear from him, and he asked for time to see me that following Saturday, I knew he would ask me to marry him. And he did. Now, you must understand, for around 3 years, I was very happy as a single person. And so when I said yes to him, there was a fear. I thought, what have I done? I haven't walked beside this man for around four years. I hardly know him. What have I done? And I was so happy as a single at that point. But as I got on my knees and prayed, again, peace came. Well, that Sunday morning, we went to church. And during worship time, all of a sudden, God gave the emotions that were necessary for a relationship. Because before that, I was just obeying God.
You were not in love with this man.
I was not in love with him. I was just obeying God. But God gave the emotions. And that has stood in good stead in our marriage. Because at times when I have lacked the emotions needed for romance in the marriage, I know that I can go to my Abba Father, and he will again replenish that supply of emotional love.
He can rekindle that romantic love. And I think that's a great message for somebody watching today, and certainly a great encouragement for single women, because I've heard this story before of God just igniting that love, that romance.
Yes, yes.
Well, it's not from nowhere, it's right from heaven.
And you must believe that God is the best matchmaker. He knows how he's wired you. He knows how he's wired the mate he wants to give you. And when it's his time, it's good and it's right.
We're going to make you wait for the family picture. It's coming up before we finish our time together. But a month after you were married, I think you were on a plane to Asia.
That's true.
And the countries you've been in, Mongolia, China, Tibet, Nepal, India. Quite the world traveler. We're going to see some highlights. Let's take a look at these pictures. I'm not sure how much you can tell, but oh, that is beautiful.
When God gives us that incredible love for someone and gives us that unction in our spirit, we must share Christ with them. I think there was a story shared at the beginning of this book. It's okay. There was a story shared at the beginning of this book where when I was in university, I had a friend who I would often play squash with, but I never shared Christ with her. And then the Lord gave me a dream one night. And in the dream, this friend was standing before Jesus in heaven. And Jesus was saying, no, you cannot enter. And then my friend turned and she saw me standing there. And she looked at me, she said, Karen, you knew the way to heaven. Why didn't you tell me? And in my heart, I knew that I needed to tell her. And so over the next term, we had a chance to study the Bible together. Well, after her wedding, I went over to teach English in an Asian country. At the end of my time in that Asian country, a friend brought news to me that she and her husband had both been killed in a car crash. But when that unction comes to share, we need to share.
People need to know the way.
Because we never know when God is going to take their life out, and that may be the last opportunity we have.
It's interesting, you went through a brief period in your university years where you wondered if Jesus really was the only way.
Yes, and I think similar to many people going through university and just going through that questioning time, is there another way to God? Is what I believed as a child, does it really hold water now? And during that time, I think I prided myself with being a strong Christian, that I would not be influenced by others. But little did I know that the friends that I hung around with and their lack of faith influenced me greatly. So by the time I first left to go to China to teach English, that was over 20 years ago, I questioned whether Jesus was the only way to God. I thought, you know, as long as you're a loving person, you're good, possibly that's all you really need. I mean, who am I to say you must believe in Jesus. That's the only way. And it wasn't until I reached Hong Kong and stayed with some very godly German ladies. And while I stayed with them, although they did not say anything directly to me, I just felt so uncomfortable. And the last night that I was there, I confided in one of them, and I said, this is what's going on in my heart. I'm not even sure that Jesus Christ is the only way. And I still remember her looking at me, Moira, and she looked at me and she said, Karen, if Jesus Christ is not the only way, why would God have sent his son Jesus to die? And all of a sudden, it was just like a brick hit me over the head, and I thought, yes, that's true. I mean, if there was another way, God would not have sent his son Jesus to die. And so at that point, she challenged me. She said, Karen, you're at a crossroads. You can choose the narrow way or the wide way. If you choose the narrow road, even some of your Christian friends may think that you're narrow-minded. But she said, the choice is yours. And so that day I chose the narrow road. And
what happened as a result of that choice?
Things just sped up. It was just like a snowball rolling down a hill. And there was just a closeness to God. I mean, God also showed himself in a beautiful way in China the next year, in such a beautiful way that I did not want to leave China, because I thought, Lord, I've never seen you in Canada to the same degree I saw you in China. But again, the Lord spoke. He said, Karen, as I was with you in China, I will be with you in Canada. Return to Canada.
My Lord and my God, seeing God in life's valleys. And you say in the book, each new season required a letting go of the past and embracing the new. Sometimes gifts and ambitions needed to be shelved for a time, as God gave us a new assignment, which required a new set of priorities and skills.
Yes.
I just see a woman, a family, going with God. And the result is an adventure. It's never dull, it's ever changing.
Yes.
And just the reality of a sufficient Savior in the midst.
Yes.
And what a beautiful family. I promised this picture. Take a look. I mean, now 3 boys have been part of this adventure. Here's you and Ralph. And who's the dog?
That's Maple.
Maple. And what are the boys' names?
Daniel is our oldest, Jonathan, and Samuel is our youngest.
And God said to you, don't always choose an easy road for your children. They've had to be adventurers too in God's plan.
Yes, yes, yes. And again, I'm so thankful we can trust God with that. I can remember one situation where I had dropped our oldest son off at a kindergarten in the Asian country we were working among. The kindergarten had 1,000 children. He did not speak the language much. And as I left him there, of course, tears threatened to flow down my cheeks. I thought, Lord, what have I done? And again, the Lord spoke into my heart. He said, Karen, he's under my wings. And that just brought such encouragement. I thought, okay, Lord, I can't walk that road for my children, but you will walk it with them.
Karen, you got me wanting to get the spiritual wax out of my ears to hear the Lord speak so beautifully. And you will be encouraged. Here's just one more point as I read the book, and we don't have time to unpack it, but the value of crying out, you know, the potential of intimacy with God when life gets into that crunchy place, and the value affirmed through the Old Testament of crying out, not just praying, crying out to God. My Lord and my God. I hope you will get this book. It's at our e-store. You can click or you can call. And it's not a big read, but it is a big blessing. Pray for Karen and her family as they head back to Asia. And don't you go away, because we'll be back.